So, when I ask, what is Odoo? What comes to mind? Well, Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a suite of business management software that some people say is like fertilizer because of the way it promotes growth. But some people also say Odoo is like a magic beanstalk because it grows with your company and is also magically affordable. But then again, you could look at Odoo in terms of how its individual software programs are a lot like building blocks. I mean, whatever your business needs, manufacturing, accounting, HR programs, you can build a custom software suite that's perfect for your company. So what is Odoo? Well, I guess Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a fertilizer, magic beanstalk building blocks for business. Yeah, that's it. Which means that Odoo is exactly what every business needs. Learn more and sign up now at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so glad you're here. We challenge conventional thinking about customer experience because I believe that improving experiences isn't just good for business, it's a powerful way to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Each week, we feature thought-provoking conversations with industry thought leaders from a variety of backgrounds, offering unique perspectives and actionable insights. Get ready to sharpen your leadership and transform your approach to customer experience. Let's dive in. Well, I couldn't be more excited to have on the Delighted Customers Podcast this episode, Greg Kihlstrom. Greg and I go way back, actually over 15 years before I got involved in CX at all. And he has somehow come back into my life. And we crossed paths in Baltimore at one point at a CXPA event that happened down there. And we have developed a business partnership in that I am part of his umbrella of podcasts, part of the Agile Brand Network. Greg is the host of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. Greg, welcome back to the Delighted Customers Podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, excited to be here, and I'm thrilled at the success of your show as well. It's been a great partnership.
Well, Greg, can you share? And I agree 100%. And thank you so much for helping the work that you and your team do to help lift up our show here. Can you share a little bit more about what you do with our audience?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I come originally from a marketing background. So I say I'm a recovering agency owner. So I sold an agency, ran it for about 14 years here in the Washington, D.C. area where I'm still at. Always throughout that, I was very passionate about the kind of the intersection of customers and the technology that serves those customers. And I found that, after I sold the agency, I now work as an independent consultant for a number of organizations. I also host the podcast. I've written a few books. I always find myself kind of going back to, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in CX or other areas, just how can technology better serve not only consumers and the end customers, but also the employees and the consumers of that technology within the corporation. So yeah, looking forward to talking with you.
Well, I consider you a MarTech expert, Greg, and I know you attend a lot of conferences in marketing and CX and other areas. And I know recently you've been traveling, you still have some left to do here, but you've been to places where there's a lot of mind sharing going on around what's new and cutting edge. And what I'd like to do is pick your brain a little bit, if it's okay.
Yeah.
And share with our audience some of the newer things, some of the fresher things that are out there. In particular, if we can think through the customer life cycle and different applications of AI and technology that you've seen out there that could help really nurture and deepen relationships that brands have with their customer base, whether it's when they're trying to get them to make that initial purchase, or they've already come on board and now we're servicing them, the service operation model, even helping the organization measure the success of their customer base or how they're delivering the experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Happy to talk through it. Yeah, I mean, I can maybe just start at the beginning of the journey, and I think there's been tons of talk about AI. There's tons of information, misinformation, and tons of stats that people kind of hang on to, I think. But I think what's what's been really interesting over the last several months is there's I think there's certain anecdotes that people kind of glom onto as far as like consumers hate chatbots, and so therefore we should never use that. So just to use an early example in the journey, like it's not that consumers hate any form of AI based interaction or something early in the journey. It's that they really don't like dumb chatbots that aren't helpful, just like they don't like dumb phone trees that send them in the endless doom loop. So getting past some of the early preconceptions of consumers don't like some of the stuff versus what don't they like about it. Consumers love personalized content, offers, deals, you name it, interactions, and just that a brand understands them. And what was always, the traditional way of understanding a brand, if you run a mom and pop store, it's like, the people that walk in every day by name and you know what their kids are doing and blah, blah, blah. But AI and personalization allows you to do that at scale. And so consumers really like that. What they don't like is being shown irrelevant offers that are, quote unquote personalized, but really just based on some irrelevant information. And so I think it's because it's continually evolving. There's a lot of people that are kind of thinking, I would say, the thinking 2 years ago versus the thinking today, because these tools have gotten a lot better at understanding and anticipating, and that's just talking about early on in the journey.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Greg, what do you think stood in the way of companies using AI in the form of chatbots or something similar effectively in the past, and what is helping to change that now? Because, one of the things that comes to mind for me is technology in search of a strategy never really works. And I believe, and by the nature of this name of this show, Delighted Customers Podcast, we believe it starts with the customer and gets reverse engineered backwards. It should. But what stood in the way, and what's making it feel like maybe there's some hope?
Yeah, definitely. I'm an optimist when it comes to this stuff in general, but I do believe there's real hope. Yeah, I write a newsletter for LinkedIn called AI Isn't a Goal or a Strategy, much to what you just said. So I completely agree. It's easy to kind of jump on the bandwagon and say, slap AI on it and stuff. I think some of the reasons why early entrees into AI weren't successful is because the tooling itself wasn't very smart. I mean, again, like a chatbot that is like pre-programmed from a very limited set of options. I've used those successfully, but maybe I can count on my hand the times that I've actually used them to solve an actual problem versus one that's intelligent and fed information and, and really intended to be helpful. Those didn't exist, at scale a number of years ago. Now they do. So the company that says, let's slap a chatbot on the site because our competitor has it, they may be choosing the wrong one. So that's just that's slapping a tactic on a problem without really thinking it through. And to your point, what's the customer experience? And just like with the phone trees that still, drive at least myself batty, but probably many others, go through that process yourself and actually go through and see if you can solve anything but the most basic inquiry. That's fine, but make it really easy to get out of that. And I think that's the other thing where, as people are getting more comfortable with using AI, they're also getting more comfortable with this idea that humans have a real place here too. And it's not a replacement. It's there need to, and there should be human gatekeepers at multiple points in the process. So, to go back to the AI chatbot example, if you use one that's good, and there's plenty out there that are very good at what they do, always give the human an out to say, if you want to talk to someone here, you might have to wait for 20 minutes or an hour, but if you really want to do that, like give them an out to do that, and don't force people to use your AI, but give them better tools and actually, again, go through the process yourself and see what it's like. And if it's a miserable experience, then what are you really solving?
Yeah. And we've all been through the miserable experiences, and we kind of shake our heads and say, did you really think that was going to be helpful for me?
Right.
So you 100% agree with your thought about kind of being empathetic and walking through the customer's shoes, walking in their shoes. I wanted to ask you about specific applications. We've heard a lot about agent AI and some of the things that are coming out. What have you heard that's caught your attention that you think could really improve the experience for customers?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, agentic AI is definitely, it's the buzzword of the season, let's say. I would say I'm really excited about it. I think there's a lot of potential there. I've also heard and experienced some firsthand, but I've also heard plenty of stories where you just need, for those less familiar with it, I mean, essentially agentic AI is an AI talking to another AI, performing a multiple set of tasks and scheduling it, and tons of potential in that, and yet it relies even more on really good data, really good connections between tools that really understand what they're doing. And so, as you would imagine, with increased complexity comes increased potential to just really screw things up. So, I have heard some, I wouldn't call them nightmare stories, but like some stories about, hey, we started down this path and now we need to like take a minute and think this through a little more. So I think by the end of this year, we're going to hear some really compelling stories about agentic and how it's going to play a role. I would say for those that like to play around with stuff, there are, even if you use like ChatGPT or others like that, you can schedule things. Like I would recommend playing around with some of these tools just to kind of understand how they work, and so you can then apply them. I think what I've heard. I guess different kind of agent, but at some of the shows that I've been to recently is how AI can really augment and support the customer service agent in some ways, and in really interesting ways that also kind of reinforce what we were just talking about as far as like humans are really needed in this process, but humans don't always have to do all the work, and also humans are really bad at certain kinds of work and machines are really good at it. So, when you pick up the phone, when a customer service agent picks up the phone, having your exact history and a summary of that history rather than having to read through, pages and pages of notes, like it may all be there, like whatever system you're using, I'm sure it has a record of your customers, but actually giving meaningful summaries of those things, taking really good notes of the interaction so the customer service agent can spend their time focused on you and not making sure that their records are complete before they have to rush to the next call, or even after the fact, helping with like root cause analysis of issues. So, again, managers of agents, they don't have tons of time they can look at, they're not going to read mountains of transcripts, right? They're going to look at the biggest problems and do certain things, but having a tool that helps mass summarize what's going on, what the problems are, and where to look to solve those problems. I mean, those are three huge ways of looking at, how AI plays a very good role, and yet humans get to do what they do best, which is form, empathetic relationships with customers.
So an illustration of that might be customers calling in. You're talking, when you get a larger company, you could be talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of calls in a month. And there's a ton of data. There's really too much data almost. And so what you're describing to me, and make sure I'm getting this right, is that the root cause piece is really appealing as a CX person, right? Because you want to not keep playing whack-a-mole and doing heroics to try and, it's great when Greg gets an accolade for doing a triple backflip for a customer who wrote this beautiful testimonial letter. But you don't want to have to perform heroics because there's something broken upstream, right? And so I'm curious about, the how, but if you generally talk at a high level about how this works, how can it go back and find the root cause? CX professionals know that every touch point matters, but managing the entire customer journey can be challenging, especially for enterprises due to disjointed data, difficulty aligning stakeholders, and struggling to secure executive support. That's where JourneyTrack comes in. JourneyTrack integrates journey mapping, management, and measurement, allowing you to pinpoint friction, optimize experiences, and demonstrate the ROI of CX initiatives. So you can align teams, break down silos, and then you can track improvements in real time. With JourneyTrack, you get visibility across every channel and touchpoint. No more guesswork, just clear insights and measurable results. Join the CX leaders who transform journeys into improved experiences with impactful business outcomes like reduced churn and increased customer lifetime value. Visit journeytrack.io today and see how better journeys lead to better business.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause. And MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
Yeah. I mean, and because these tools have access to a lot deeper information than just a call. A customer, they may be frustrated, they may be focused on one tiny aspect. I mean, we all have biases, right? So it could be the anchor bias of the first thing that happened, or the recency bias that's the last thing, or any of the other 98 biases, or however many there are. AI doesn't, there's plenty of talk about bias in AI, and that's a thing, and so I don't want to discount that, but I will make the argument that humans have plenty of their own biases, and so AI has a different way of looking at data and what might seem anecdotal, and to analyze that, and it also can look at interactions in the aggregate. So it's not just determining what happened to cause Greg's problem, but okay, we're seeing, this general trend. Here are some of the points that you need to look at and analyze those, and then you solve problems for potentially 10,000 customers because the AI is able to analyze all of these things and kind of point in the right direction of where to look. So I think that's, again, managers they're looking at statistics, they're looking at high level dashboards and graphs, but no human can actually go through and do that work, unless maybe if they know the question to ask, they can do it, and they get lucky if they ask the right question. It's kind of a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it's like the premise is that you've got good data, complete data, accurate, complete, and you've got sort of access to all that relevant data connected to each other, right? And then, like, if I could blue sky this for a minute, since you're an optimist and I talked about hope earlier, wouldn't it be cool if we could use AI to not only go to the root cause analysis of an issue, but periodically, whether it's on demand or once a day or it's upon request, we could ask the AI to say, pick out the 3 improvements that we could make in the experience, whatever that goes back to, and give us a cost analysis breakdown on that.
Yeah.
What would it cost and what would be the return on that investment? And explain to us why. Because CX leaders, for example, are often tasked with, burdened with, whatever, held responsible for the return. And it's not just CX. I say this all the time. Marketing people every department's trying to prove why they need funds and resources. So, but wouldn't it be cool if organizationally the AI could do that? Have you heard anything about that in your travels?
I think it's already possible, but for the disconnect between the financial data and the CX data or marketing data or whatever. So that's a near future kind of thing. And I think there are some organizations that are able to do that. Maybe it takes an extra hurdle, but I think the platforms that I'm seeing, they have the capability to start connecting those dots. It's just what I also see, and working with some very large companies, is the data. We talk about people silos, and there's all silos of all kinds. The data silos are also kind of what's holding that back. And, some of it is, I'll call it well-intentioned, as far as, a company doesn't want to share its financial data with some providers to just, keep things confidential or whatever. So I totally understand that piece. But this stuff, you already said it, but like this stuff works best when it sees everything and when it can tie all those things together. So I would say, that scenario it's not far-fetched at all. I would say it's possible. It just takes some integrations that a lot of companies, I think, at this point are maybe reluctant to do with a single platform, but I think they're connecting the dots as we speak.
So if I'm a if it doesn't matter B2B or B2C, let's just say a mid-sized company in my industry, and I want to deploy AI applications to improve the experience. I'd hope that would be the top of the list, but obviously to grow revenues and increase profits and lower costs. What kind of a partner am I seeking? Like, I assume if I'm Citibank or Delta Airlines or, I don't know, Chick-fil-A, I'm going to find a partner to help in AI that might look like IBM or someone like that, McKinsey or PwC, someone with a technology arm. But if I'm a middle-sized company, it might not be the price tag that's going to work for me. As I think about other industries, there are sort of mid-range players that work with companies that are mid-size that might not have a staff of Harvard MBAs on board, but they can help. So tell me your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same integrations apply. I think, the scale's certainly different. I don't know that I think the challenge is that the scale doesn't necessarily make it easier. It's again, for a Delta Airlines, obviously they have a lot more data than a small or medium-sized business, but that medium-sized business, they still have the silos, and they still have to connect the dots, and that costs, and whether the costs are relative or not, there's still considerable costs. I think the overall trend in technology, composable, talk about buzzwords, that's certainly a trend in the technology world. I see a lot in the MarTech world, but this idea of products being easier and easier to integrate with each other, I think there's potential there. I think there still is going to be a hurdle on the financial side of, it depends on how deep you want to go into integrating, whether it's CX numbers or marketing numbers or whatever with the finances. I mean, I'm seeing some really interesting things starting to happen, but they're still kind of starting in the enterprise and sometimes working their way down to smaller companies. But I think it's at the very least, it's a hurdle that kind of happens outside of the platform. So in other words, you have the CX data, where to look, because even the platforms I'm talking about, they're very large companies use them, but other smaller companies can use a lot of these platforms as well, and quite reasonably. So like, you have all the data, you just need to connect the dots kind of outside of the platforms that you may be using. So it's a hurdle, but it's still possible.
Yeah, it's so interesting that even especially because of all this technology and the speed at which it's becoming more available, that it just puts a spotlight on what I would call change management efforts. And that involves human beings, and that involves trust, right? It involves co-creation and collaboration and building a guiding coalition. As you talk about silos, you still got to bust those to make all this really effective as it could be. Right?
Yeah, and it's this better than me here, but like, I work on the process side of things and less on the behavioral side of things, but change is hard. The Kubler-Ross change curve, it mirrors the stages of grief, right? So it's like, when people's jobs change, you should think of it in terms of that. There's denial you go through the stages. So it's like, it's real. And, people get used to doing a job a certain way. And, the other slight tangent, but I think the other thing going on that I'm seeing is, and this is even from the big companies who made and still make a lot of money sending surveys out, are moving very quickly towards, how do we get information that isn't survey based? And so, that's great, Greg, for the technology. Yeah.
If I can interrupt for a minute.
Sure.
Information that's around customer sentiment.
Right. Well, sentiment as well as like real-time behavior. And so by tying all of those things together, I mean, I think I'm excited about that piece of it, because I mean, surveys aren't going to go away, but like, I think there's challenges with surveys, and I think some of those challenges are growing with like fatigue and stuff like that. But, you get someone whose job it's been to, one of the big things in their job has been to send out surveys and rely on results from those. And then all of a sudden you're telling them, well, yeah, we're doing that, but we're also collecting all this other data that feels like that feels like marketing data, or that feels like sales data or whatever. And so, you're causing a lot of change by adopting these things, whether you call it a change initiative or not. Just the way things are moving, it's causing people to need to even using AI in your job. So, certain people love that idea and gravitate towards it. Others are threatened by it, and rightfully so or not.
Yeah. So with any change initiative, we've got to prepare our team for it. We got to help them understand why this even matters, help them get to the point where they're on board with wanting it, give them what they need to know, and help them feel good at doing what they need to do, and then reinforcing. I just went through our ADKAR model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But I was going to ask you, what do you see or what have you heard that's sort of futuristic that says, maybe not 6 months from now, but down the road, what's in development? What kinds of things can we expect down the road that could improve the experience for customers?
Yeah, I do think maybe to go back to the agentic side of things is, customers being able to solve very complex problems from a single source. So, some of that, I mean, just to use a basic example of, you call up your bank and you get transferred to 20 different people to solve the let alone having multiple problems to solve on the same call or whatever, which I've also had. But, being able to solve things that cannot be solved immediately, that take timing and scheduling to be able to do. Another example would be, planning a trip with, a complex, you've got hotels, you've got flights, you've got car rentals, you've got dinner reservations, you've got all of these things, doing all of that based on a prompt or maybe a couple prompts. But that's where things are headed is, how does AI or a team of AIs really, from the consumer's perspective, who cares? It could be 100 AIs. They have a problem, and a complex problem that takes a lot of time, a lot of understanding, and a lot of complexity to solve. Again, not always something that can be solved in one sitting either. But companies that are going to be able to solve that, that's what the expectation is going to be. And we see little twinkles of that right now, even with, some subscriptions even, or some things like that. It's like we start anticipating things or being able to plan ahead, but we're going to be talking about much more complicated things and the expectations for those that are, the nice part about it will save some time. The downside, some smaller organizations are going to struggle at first to connect those dots, but the large organizations I know as well, they're struggling just in different way. They may have more resources to do it, but they have way more technical debt and complex systems and stuff. So it's, maybe the playing field will be level enough and just everybody's going to be dealing with their own problems. But yeah, back to your question, I think it's, a customer has an issue which they would normally go to 3 different places to solve, and they solve it at once in a way that, they get the results they need.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch, and excited to hear what you're learning, and share all that with the audience. What we have to look forward to, and also some of the things you kind of pointed out as some of the, I guess, hurdles that we're dealing with now, we will continue to deal with, and some of the thinking around starting with the customer and working backwards with whatever technology we're using.
Yeah.
My final question to you, Greg, in someone who's been a marketer for so long, a marketing expert in my world who's been involved with CX, you personally, what delights you as a customer?
As feeling understood, and and before I have to say something. So when I get, and it can be super simple. It can be a hotel knowing that I've stayed there before. That's surprisingly a surprise, but it's just just feeling understood, so I don't have to explain myself, because usually I will do just about anything to not have to interface with other people, I guess, in customer interactions and situations. So, when I do interact and somebody anticipates something, that's, that I'm a customer for life.
Yeah. And it's just, I think to your point, it's so important for companies to understand that about their customers in their business, in that particular journey or customer life cycle. What are the critical moments? What are the points where they're going to maybe need to speak to a human being, or the next level of expertise in a human being? And you can get them there quickly. And you can know them You can know them. I heard that so much when I was at the bank about know me and why we do business. We just spent some time talking about, at least I did, about the challenges that smaller companies with smaller budgets are going to have to keep up with the AI race. And they could feel like it's David and Goliath. But on the other hand, they have a strategic advantage by being small and knowing their customers. Like that's something they're already better at the big guys on in most cases. Right. My admonition, I know what you think about this, is like, let's not lose that focus.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think AI is a way for the bigger companies to mimic some of that stuff. And again, I appreciate it. When I stay at a large hotel chain and again, they know that it's like, I don't care if that individual knows anything about me, but I appreciate that the company understands. But when I walk into a small business and I was there yesterday and they don't recognize me, like shame on them. It's like but to your point, like they have a much better opportunity because they're closer to the data, they're closer to their customers and everything like that. So yeah, lean into it. Every customer experience improvement doesn't have to be a technology improvement, even though I know that's on everybody's mind, but use AI and all that stuff when you can. It's a huge time saver, efficiency saver, but people still matter, right?
People definitely matter. Greg, thank you so much for being a guest again on the Delighted Customers podcast and sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause. And MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.